I kind of froze for a minute. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, this is really happening. And out of the corner of my eye, I see General Shelton, and he's kind of like, okay. And I said, they destroyed the satellite. He makes the call to the Secretary of Defense. It was clear at that point that space would forever be contested.
I had no idea. It was just another work day.
It's the first time in 63 years that a new service had ever stood up.
Yeah, we won the Cold War.
Are we the adults? Who's in charge of us?
Did you always know you wanted to go in the military? The courage needed to just kind of step into the void.
And he goes, oh, that's a terrible idea. That's unproven path. I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. I watched the Chinese destroy a satellite, and Jennifer's like, we're late for soccer practice. Let's go. I'm in the Middle East fighting the war. While I'm away, they decide to stand up a Space Force.
You are part of starting a new service.
And how it changed life as we know it forever. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Space Power Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Wolf, and I'm honored to be back in the Space House. Just a little over 4 years ago, I was sitting right here in this room talking to then a brand new CSO, General Saltzman. Today, I have the honor to sit down back in the Space House talking to General Saltzman and Jennifer Saltzman. Thanks so much for letting SFA back into your home.
Well, thanks for being here.
And it's all set up right now for the 4th of July. Yeah. Jennifer, you don't miss a holiday. Nope. And I know there's probably
I make up a few, I don't know,
dedicated to just your decorations. But we got to start all the way back because, again, the Space House didn't exist when we entered the service. The right. Space Force wasn't even a thought 30 years ago. But let's even go back a little bit further. Can you tell the story about how you met and really specifically how you asked Jennifer to marry you?
Honestly, I don't remember not knowing Jennifer. Like, I
think we must have met. I was in 7th grade, I think, and he would have been in 9th grade.
We've known each other a long time.
Mm-hmm.
The reintroduction, though, that's the story. The fact that we, even re-met again was because, which I don't remember what it's called, like you had to stay, you had graduated from college, and came home because you couldn't go to Vandenberg yet.
Yeah, we won the Cold War, remember?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And the peace dividends, so we were all on delayed entry. So it was like, all right, you're a second lieutenant, but need you to go find a job before you go to training.
And it was like 10 months.
Home, yeah. And
he came back home, and I was in college at Western Kentucky, and it was in the summer, and it was at a Sigma Chi summer party. That's where I think we differ a little bit, but at a Sigma Chi summer party, and we just kind of...
I would never go to a Sigma Chi summer party.
Of course you wouldn't, sir.
It had to be a Lambda Chi.
Right. See that? Yeah, no. Because I was a little sister, so it was definitely, we were at the Sigma Chi house, and we just kind of saw each other and were chatting, and then before you knew it, I don't know, we went on a date, and then that was it. And 10 months later, we got engaged.
Yeah, Jennifer was turning 21. That's just how long ago it was.
That's true.
Her birthday's on March 1st. So I took her to lunch, I think. Was it dinner? It was dinner.
It was dinner.
Dinner.
It was dinner.
At our favorite restaurant. And it just so happened that it was a leap year. So it wasn't really her birthday. It was February 29th. And I'm like, well, does she turn 21? Can we get drinks? Like, I don't know if, February 29th kind of throws off the March 1st, 21st birthday a little bit.
Yeah.
But we did have champagne delivered, and I asked her to marry me, and she didn't talk for a while. She didn't eat. I had to eat her meal and mine.
I know. I was like, gosh, I could have eaten first or something, but I think the more fun story, the old school story, is how you talk to my dad.
Well, yeah. You got to ask for permission,
Yes, sir. How'd that conversation go?
He was all business. Dr. John Peterson, Vice President of Academic Affairs at Western Kentucky. As soon as her mom was like, oh, this is great. And her dad was like, what's your plan? How's she going to finish her degree? Where are you going to go? So I had a few things. I anticipated that. I was a planner even back then, I guess. And I anticipated that. And I showed the brochure of the College of Great Falls, Montana, and how she was going to be well educated, even if she followed me around. And that seemed to carry the day.
It did. Oh, I mean, absolutely. Education was super important. And I think that's what Mom would say, or Mom said that he said, well, sure, but she has to graduate college first. And then, you're like, well, here, College of Great Falls information.
That was a while ago.
Did you always know you wanted to go in the military?
No. I was pretty sure I needed to go away for college. Most of my friends were staying local at Western Kentucky or going to University of Kentucky, and just felt like I needed to see something different. And, pre-internet days, so I got a brochure on Boston University, and I was like, this sounds good. And but we couldn't afford that. And so the best option was to get an ROTC scholarship. And so I got an ROTC scholarship, went to BU, and had no idea that it would lead this far. I figured, 4 years after college? No problem. 4 years, and then we'll get on with life. And here we are 35 years later.
Right. And what does that mean for you when you were saying yes, when he asked you to marry him? What are you thinking about the military?
Well, I had family, no military history. I didn't really know how that worked. And I definitely didn't know anything. I was 21 years old. So let's be clear. I wasn't really sure. I mean, I knew I was going to go to, continue to go to college. Apparently I was going to move to Montana. I'd never been there before, or had driven through maybe. My family, we were big summer travelers. He mentioned my dad was, in the university. So when summer break happened, the four of us would just get in the car. I mean, I really do think, been to all the states, the, continental ones, driving around. So I'd driven through Montana, but had never spent any time there. So I didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, I had no idea. It sounded cool. The military sounded like, okay, this is a great idea. But I think it was more like, okay,
She asked me a few questions, and I didn't know the answer to any of them. So we're like, all right, I guess we're in this together. We'll just sort it out as we go.
Right. I think the bigger part was just, I thought, well, I'm good with, this is good. So we'll figure out the other stuff, because he didn't, have any of those answers either. So I think we've just been doing that the whole time. It's just figuring it out.
Yeah, we got engaged like 2 weeks before I left for Vandenberg for missile training.
Yep.
I remember a lot of us at that time, it was a big drawdown after the first Gulf War. And so there were not a lot of pilot slots that were being handed out across the military. And so I suspect when you were looking at and got your ROTC scholarship, of course, you're going Air Force, and you probably put your dream sheet. What was on your dream sheet coming out of ROTC?
Well, again, we kind of backed into this situation, right? Because you'll remember they only gave scholarships at that time to technical degrees. And so my scholarship was in physics, which I gave it my all for at least 3 semesters. But that was not going to work out for anybody. So when I switched to a non-technical degree, the only way they would let me keep my scholarship was if I was willing to be an ICBM operator. And I'm like, absolutely. And they were like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. What do I mean, it sounded great. Like, continue on, get a degree, get a commission, whole thing. So that's how we got into ICBM operations. Is they thought they were getting a good deal, and I knew I was getting a good deal. So
I remember the pitch to me, it was, hey, do you want to get your master's degree paid for? And I said, yeah, that sounds good.
Sure.
And hey, what do you think about working 8 days a month? I was like, oh, yeah, sure. I like that.
There's no downside here.
It sounds all good.
Yeah.
There's some nuance here, of course. And so let's go to that point where we're in God's country, Montana, Great Falls, at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And I remember I was going on alert because at the time I was waiting for my crew commander. He was not pulling alerts. And so I'm going on alert with the senior crew of standardization and evaluation. Probably the most scary moment of my life up to that point. And I was going on alert with Captain Saltzman. And he said, whatever you do, that they were saying to me, the crew force was saying, don't mess up, because I'll desert you right there. And so I was on my best behavior. You remember that alert, General?
I have no recollection of that alert whatsoever. I think that's mostly because, as you remember, the first duty of the crew commander when we got to alert was to go to bed.
That's right. Take care of checklists, steps, review.
Get changed over and hit the rack so that then later in the shift, after like midnight, you would be woken up and you finished out the alert fully rested. Well, somebody thought it was safer, I think, if I just stayed in bed. And so I've never slept that good in my life. I think I slept like 18 hours straight, and you woke me up as the new crew was coming on, and I'm like, this is awesome.
Because I was told it's easier if. And I remember you said, hey, I'm kind of tired, just got done with the TDY, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the rack. And we didn't talk a lot, which was fine to me because, again, all that meant is exposure. I don't want to get in trouble.
Head down.
And so, yeah, it was safer for me, for you just to sleep through the entire alert, and I could stay on crew.
Well, you have a memory of this alert because it was a really long one for you. The alert was like an hour for me. So.
And that's when the friendship really started. And I think it's important because connection, one of the 4 C's.
My favorite one.
That's where it all started. And it's funny because you look at the friends you've got today that we still stay in contact with. Those friends we met back in, missiles 30 years ago.
Absolutely. Because you grew up together.
Yeah.
We were all doing that crazy thing.
And we went through the crucible.
Right.
Yeah, talk a little bit about the crucible and how important it was to establish connection in that situation. Because it's a tough job pulling alert. And it's comparable to what Guardians are doing today in terms of pulling shifts and doing that kind of work. So talk about how you created that connection.
Well, I mean, it's such lasting friendships, like Jennifer was just saying. It's because we're all in the same boat, basically. We're all the same age. We're all brand new. None of us know what we're doing. We're all trying to figure the military out. We're all trying to figure our responsibilities, figure marriage out. And so it's just this collection of 23, 24-year-olds trying to sort it all out. And we thought we had it sorted out by the end of that tour, as I recall. So, it's hard to not keep those as your closest and dearest friends when you share all that background.
I know. I often say that too, that we did grow up together, but we'd look around on a weekend when everybody was together and we're like, are we the adults? Who's in charge of us? Like, who is taking care of us?
True.
And I say that all the time. I'm like, we are the adults. I'm like, that can be trouble. I mean, and back then, I think it was so interesting. Later in life, Guardians will ask me like, piece of advice or something. And a lot of times it's usually live on a base at least one time. Yeah. And back then you had to wait, and we wanted to. We moved into an apartment in Great Falls because base housing's full. And, everybody's on the list. Everybody wants to live on base for that connection piece. You could walk, back then, Friday night, the basement club was where you went. And that's where, everybody got together and you wanted to be able to walk there. I think, we waited a year, I think, a full year to move on to base, 34 Cedar Street.
One of my friends from that time frame got me a shirt later that said, "Bad decisions make the best stories." And I think he was referring to those first few years.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just getting together and, usually you found if that tour was like 4 years, you knew that you would maybe get off 2 Christmases, but you would be on alert for 2 Christmases, or for Thanksgivings, the same thing. Or, we were young and didn't have any money anyway, so we were going to spend all those holidays together. So I think, I have very fond memories of, making Thanksgivings and, being at different houses and, playing games and, those are great.
Shoveling snow.
Yes. Shoveling snow.
It was cold.
It was cold.
It gets cold.
It was cold.
The first summer we were there. So we got to the base, at the end of June. And I took her down to the river in Great Falls to watch the fireworks at 4th of July. And it snowed on us.
And that is true.
It snowed on us. You had to wait till like 11 o'clock before it was dark enough up there in the northern tier. So it's like 11 o'clock at night and you're looking up watching fireworks and there's snow coming down. And she was like, "Where did you bring me?"
That is true. I'm like, I'll be in the car because I didn't have a coat. I was like, it was the 4th of July. Mm-hmm. I wasn't thinking that could be a possibility, but.
And as you talk about the families that are there. Mm-hmm. So young family starts. John shows up.
Yeah.
Sarah shows up. So talk about how it is having young kids, you going on alert and not being able to talk really to Jennifer about what you're doing on alert. It's all classified. And so how was that, Jennifer, growing up with 2 young kids and not knowing really what your husband's doing?
So John did. John came, he was only there he came in September of 95, and then we left summer of 96. You know, I guess it's one of those things where that is your normal. So I didn't know what to compare it to. We started having kids a little bit before a lot of my friends did. I mean, some of them were pretty soon after, but I don't know. That's the same thing. You just figure it out. But, you know, we've never done this before. So how does this work? And
this is back to the kind of the community that you create. So when I would go on alert, she had a community of people that were willing to help, because it's like, okay, she's got a 2-month-old and I'm gone for 24, 30 hours. And so I think you would say that you kind of rely on that network of people around you, and everybody relied on each other and gave it that kind of connection, community feel to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I didn't know. I think it is. You don't know. That is just your normal. So, I mean, that just is how it worked. And so I didn't know any other way. So I didn't know that it was good or bad. That was what we did.
Yeah.
So.
And remember, from a career perspective, that's when they opened the floodgates. They said, okay, all you missileers, we need some more discipline in space. So we're going to open up the floodgates and allow you to transition from missiles to space. A lot of us ran through that floodgate as soon as it opened because we're excited about the potential future. And so, sir, you headed over to the NRO.
That's right. And in fact, it was even doubly important because in that same time frame, we went from 6 missile bases to 3 missile bases.
Right.
And so they were actively looking for places to tuck away old ICBM operators. And so, I got an opportunity to go out to Sunnyvale, one of the old NRO ground stations. And that's really where I learned to fly satellites is in the NRO.
And how is it again? Now you're in California.
Which love. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah.
Because what he's doing.
Oh, no. Nope. I mean, I think those...
Even more secretive than the ICBM operation.
Just, the big blue cube, and it was just this mysterious building.
And so still pulling shift. So still working, midnight to 6 or whatever occasionally. And Jennifer's got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was, I think we were in a 1,000 square foot townhouse.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Now let's talk about the weapon school. Just celebrated its 30th year in existence. What was the impetus that got you to apply and go to the weapon school? What were you thinking about?
Well, I mean, I think I was coming up on the end of the tour in the NRO, and I had, good friends that had gone to weapon school. So I had some connections or people that I could ask, like, what's this about? Because it was so new. No one knew exactly what it was. And I guess I felt like it was my responsibility to figure out what I wanted to do next. I don't remember ever anybody calling saying, this is what your plan is, or this is what you're doing. You were just on your own. Like, what's the next job? Well, I don't know, get out there and figure it out. And so as I was thinking about what the next chapter was, I'd heard this idea of going to the weapons school. So I asked some friends and they said, yeah, it's hard, it's challenging, but kind of leads down a certain weapons officer path and kind of figure out what that is. I remember calling the chief of non-rated operations at the personnel center, who happened to be a former squadron commander in missiles. And I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about going to the weapons school. What do you think? He goes, oh, that's a terrible idea. Like that's unproven path. No one knows where that's going to lead. And so when I hung up with him, I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. Like, that sounds perfect. An unproven path. How could you go wrong there? So maybe that's a theme too. I remember every time somebody told me it wasn't a very clear path, or, it's kind of hard, or we're not sure exactly how this is going to work out. That really always piqued my interest. And so.
Sure. That brings up another quality that's important, obviously, to the service is courage. So talk a little bit about the courage needed to just kind of step into the void and establish your own path. Well,
I mean, courage feels a little bit more than what that took to volunteer to go to Nellis, go to Las Vegas for a class. But I think the idea of saying I don't need to know what the prescribed path is to success. I'm not interested in what others thought was, hey, you need to do this, then you need to do that. That just didn't really inspire me in any kind of specific way. And I never thought about a career in the military. So the idea of just taking fun jobs and challenging jobs and see where it leads was certainly more interesting to me. And so when somebody said, hey, well, this is kind of new, and we're starting this up and we're trying to figure out exactly how to use space weapons officers, I'm like, I'm all in. I'm all in for that.
And how was that because you didn't go to Nellis with them. So you had...
not for school. I forget how long that was. 6 months?
Yeah, there for school. And then I stayed as an instructor.
Then that's when we came. I mean, once again, you don't know what you're doing. You just nobody knows. And I think that's the thing. They want some perfect answer to make a career great, or to, keep a family that wants to stay active duty and continue to serve. And there's not really a magic answer. I think you can set yourself up, but you have to be willing to put yourself out there, make friends, because you're in that cul-de-sac that I lived in those 6 months. I mean, there were dozens of kids on bikes, and, everybody had 1,000 square feet. So you weren't, you didn't want to stay inside, but it was California and it was perfect outside all the time. So, those months went by fast for me because of that support network. But had I stayed in the house and, just tried to focus and just do kid things and keep them in, I think it would be longer. But I know that's a difficult thing to do as well, to put yourself out there.
I said, hey, I'm going to be an instructor at the weapons school. So now we have to move from, Silicon Valley, California to Las Vegas, Nevada. And we were driving across the country in the middle of the summer, and she was not very pleased about this. And
was that the one we had no air conditioning?
No air conditioning in the car. That was a thing.
2 kids.
100 degrees when we crossed the Nevada state line.
We had water bottles, those fan water bottles. Right. So our kids, that is true.
It's true.
I'm like, just spray each other in the back, you guys. I mean, it's hot, and we all know.
It was a great game. But
yes.
She said, my children are going to learn to read looking at Las Vegas billboards. She was not very happy about the prospects.
Sure, right.
But I think 2 years later, she was like, it was an amazing assignment. And
right.
we loved every minute of it there, and the people we met and the kids, the schools they were in. And so it's one of those things where if you plan things out, or you think about the pros and cons before you just dive in, sometimes you can get it wrong. And I think we look back and say every assignment had pros and cons, but there was always good stuff. And
and every one of them.
Yeah.
And that's definitely true, but you have to find it. Now, can I rank the places that we lived, and, are some of them on the bottom? Sure. But were there good things about it? Absolutely. And maybe it's a friend that you made, or, you got to travel, or kids were, successful at a certain location. But they're all good. I mean, because it gives you something that you never would have had before.
The number of concerts that she dragged me to.
Early on, when he would go to concerts. Yeah. I don't know, I would win all those.
Yeah.
I did win a lot of
concerts.
concerts.
You bring up concerts and music before we transition to your squadron command time. Let's talk about your other love in your life.
Music.
Pat. Monahan?
Well, he's lead singer of my favorite band, for sure.
How many concerts have you gone to?
How many concerts have I gone to? It's probably too many to count. I do love live music, and, people are like, what kind of genre? I'm like, any live music is good to me. I can't do it. And so even if it's not my favorite kind of music, I appreciate live music always. Now, he appreciates it more when he has a seat now. We were standing room only back then. He would rather have a seat. And then I think now even transition, like, can Sarah go, our daughter, or like, can somebody else go with you, or a friend? Like, he's retired-ish from concert going.
Well, she's a rabid fan, and she wants to be right up front on the stage, which means you have to get there about 2 hours early to stand in line. And this is no problem for her. And I'm standing in line like, what is going on?
That's right.
Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, no, that was a fun one. We went, so I'm all over the country. And it was also a fun way to meet friends. Like, because, you would say, okay, over the summer, where are we going to go? And there'd be 2 or 3 of us that all lived in different places. And then we would meet, wherever, we'd pick a city that sounded fun to also do other things, but then always go to a concert.
and you see how that, all of that, the attitude, everything helps establish the character that you all carry with you and have carried with you through your respective careers. Let's talk about Squadron Command, because that was a pivotal moment in space as a warfighting domain. We couldn't talk about space as a warfighting domain. So talk about that critical time in 2007, and then tell me about the visitor you had come up from Hollywood, a writer, to talk about exactly how that took place.
Yeah, we went back to Vandenberg in summer of 2005, and I was the chief of plans standing up the Joint Space Operations Center. It was basically a command post tracking space operations before that, and we really turned it into, at the time, what was the Space Air Operations Center, doing all the command and control. And then I stayed on in 2006 to become the squadron commander for the Combat Ops Division of the Joint Space Ops Center, and that it again standing up a new organization to perform an important space function came with challenges, and we didn't have the right facilities, and we had to build all that out, and we didn't have procedures, and we had a tasking order but no plan, and we had no strategy documents, and we were creating all that from scratch. And so it was an exciting time. And I think, there was enough going on in the space business then that it was starting to get attention. So when Cameron Crowe came up from Hollywood, he was interested in the space business. I think he had heard me speak down in LA at what was the Space and Missile Center, now Space Systems Command. There, I was on a panel and was talking about it. He said, I got to go talk to that guy. And so he came all the way up to Vandenberg one day and spent the afternoon with us. And we talked about how great Fast Times at Ridgemont High was. And then he talked about, what does it mean to be in space operations? What is this job that you're doing? Like it was kind of fun to try to explain to somebody who had no preconceived notions. But then I played my trump card by inviting him back to the house for dinner, and Jennifer cooked dinner, and we sat around and drank wine, and he told stories about Hollywood, and we told stories about space, and that was kind of a fun night.
That was super fun. I mean, the kids were like, "Who's this man?" I mean, they were young, and they're like, "Wait, we want a picture." I'm like, "Sure, I guess." They were.
Well, he was married at the time to one of the greatest guitar players of all time.
That's true.
So that was
Nancy Wilson of Heart. Yeah.
And so you pull out your guitar and probably...
No, I did not.
No, you did not.
Always know your audience, and I did not do that.
Yeah, well, that was an exciting thing out of just an unexpected, but once again, like being open and ready for whatever comes and saying yes sometimes.
Inflexible enough to go, yeah,
right.
let's
do that.
Jennifer, I'm bringing somebody over for dinner. All right.
Okay.
Well, and again, I think back then, I was definitely nervous, but I thought, well, what am I going to make? What am I going to cook? And I was like, well, what if he's, I mean, back then it wasn't as much of the dietary restrictions and allergies and all the things. And I did. And I think, I don't know, and it's here by me, maybe I texted him, or emailed him and just said, hey, are you a vegetarian or anything? And he said that like 3 times. He was like, no one ever asked that. Like, thank you so much. I am not. You can, cook whatever you want. And I think I made Thai chicken pizza. I do remember that.
Sounds wonderful.
It was good.
It was pretty good. I used to make the dough, and it was good. But he was fun.
January 2007 happens. And you've told the story before, but just, summary of kind of what happened, why that was so critical to try to pivot away from space as a supporting function and space as a warfighting domain.
Well, we had pretty good indications that the Chinese were going to launch some kind of anti-satellite missile. We weren't exactly sure if it was going to be a test, what we would call a proximity test, is try to launch to a point in space, or if they were really serious about trying to destroy a satellite. And we had some indications that they might try to destroy one of their own, a defunct satellite. And so on that day, we were all prepared to make sure that if it happened, that we could see it and then rapidly characterize it and make sure we understand exactly what was happening. But I think there was still a feeling like, surely not. I mean, it's such a irresponsible thing to blow a satellite up intentionally and spread debris all over the orbits. That I think there was still some of us that were like, we'll see. I'm not. We're going to watch the test and we're going to make sure we understand exactly what they're trying to do. But so I remember standing on the operations floor. General Shelton was the general officer who was commanding the 14th Air Force at the time, and he was responsible for making sure that we notified national level leadership, the Secretary of Defense at the time, that this was going on. The Strategic Command's commander at the time too, and he was in an adjacent conference room. This is the part I'll never forget. In an adjacent conference room to our ops floor. So I'm standing on the ops floor behind the missile warning duty officers who are in contact with the radar systems that are most likely to see the attack should it unfold. And I'm going to relay to General Shelton as to whether or not this thing has happened and whether or not there's a hit. And he's immediately going to be on the phone with the commander of Strategic Command as well as the Secretary of Defense. I mean, this is a big deal. And so, the event happens, the missile launches, we detect it, it goes into orbit and it hits a satellite, and the missile operator turns to me and he says, we have multiple head count. And multiple head count sounds like, like you're at a rock concert just saying how many people are here. But, when one object in space becomes many objects in space, the radars call that a multiple head count. You expect a head count of one and you get more than that on your radar return. And I said, I kind of froze for a minute. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, this is really happening. And so I turned, and out of the corner of my eye, I see General Shelton, and he's kind of like, okay, like, what's happening? And it's at that moment that I realize I have no hand signal through this plate glass window for a destroyed satellite. So how do I indicate to him? And so I think I did something like, like that. And he was like, I don't know what that means. So I had to run outside around, and I said, they destroyed satellite. And he makes the call to the Secretary of Defense, and we start characterizing all the debris that's on orbit. It was definitely a pivotal moment because it was clear at that point that space would forever be contested. That you couldn't just count on the sanctuary of space, and that satellites were now viable targets, and we were going to have to deal with a new environment.
Unbelievable that day and how it changed life as we know it forever.
Right.
And really led to the establishment of a new service, which is the first time in 63 years that a new service had ever stood up.
So when all of that happened, I had no idea. It was just another work day. One of the times I think I heard the story like similar that he told, years later. It was many, many years later. Obviously, the Space Force is always going to do things that can't be talked about. But I will say, spouses so much appreciate, just within the last couple of years, when we get together, we get to have threat briefs. And I cannot tell you the amount of people that say, oh my gosh, like I have such a greater appreciation because I understand just a little bit. So when you get buy-in from a spouse going, well, I had no idea that they did something so important or how real the threat is. So I think that's a pretty huge change in not that long of a period of time, because to me, whatever day that was, I mean, he came home just the same.
Another important part is that we do our operations from garrison, from our bases in the United States, in just classified rooms connected with antennas. And so I watched the Chinese destroy a satellite, and we were talking about contested space domain and, what we're going to do and how we characterize all this stuff. And now I just get in my car and I drive home, and Jennifer's like, we're late for soccer practice. Let's go, grab the oranges. We're on our way. And you're just right back into life. And so that always, kind of struck me that, we are in combat operations. Sometimes it's on the phone, sometimes on a VTC, sometimes it's just looking at computer screens. But you're dealing with combat operations and missile warning and intelligence collection and all of these things. And then you just have to go home and help your grade school kid with math and don't be late for soccer practice.
Which gets harder and harder.
You can't
I don't know
talk
how
about
math changes that much, but math is way harder than it used to be. new math, and it's not new anymore.
It's always
but,
been pretty hard for me. But
well, I don't know.
so I think that's unique to the Space Force because we don't have to deploy to do our operations. We do it from our bases, and then you're caught up in the middle of life while you're conducting all those operations. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, the fact that we can talk about it now a little more than we did creates some resiliency. So when you go home and I say, "Hey, bad day," like give me a minute here to then there's an appreciation, I think, for that now.
Right.
That's when General Goldfein, before he became 2-star, when you're 1-star, General Goldfein says, "General Saltzman, fix multi-domain operations for me." So summarize again that part of your career and how important it is now today to be able to describe the characteristics of multi-domain operations and supported type functions.
Well, I'll give General Goldfein full credit. When he was coming in as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, he kind of thought through what are the big things that are happening and what does the Air Force need to do to address the big shifts that are going on. And the task he gave me was to sort out what we called multi-domain command and control. And I give him credit for it because there's really two pieces of that. One is multi-domain operations. We were sorting out how do you integrate space, how do you integrate cyber into the traditional air, land, and sea discussions that had kind of always gone on. And that was not an uncomplicated proposition just to say, how do we properly account for these new warfighting domains? But then he had the vision to say, well, it's not just about describing the operations. You have to be able to command and control the forces. And how do you do that? And so he kind of combined all that and says, "Hey, Saltzman, you got to figure out multi-domain command and control." And so that started about a 1.5-year journey, going to every air operations center and trying to figure out what are the specific details that have to be accounted for to both integrate multiple domains into coherent operations, but then provide the kind of command and control that we had always done with the air, that other services had done with the land and the sea, and make sure that we can properly be a part of the joint force and command and control. And that was a fun learning experience, I'll say.
And it sets you up perfectly to be the first deputy CFAC, non-rated deputy CFAC, or space deputy CFAC. Talk a little bit about that experience and how that shaped where you've helped take the service today.
Yeah, I was honored to be selected to go out and be the Deputy Commander of Air Force's Central Command. It was at the height of our counter-ISIS operations. Afghanistan was in full swing. And so the idea that, as a weapons officer, being a part of air operations centers, it was kind of where we integrated space. But to be told that my job wasn't to just integrate space, it was to basically help manage the air war, the space war, across the entire Middle East. It was really a culminating kind of event for an Air Force career. I didn't know when I got that job it was going to be my last Air Force job. I might have actually thought about it a little differently, but so went out and spent a year in Qatar at Al Udeid Air Base and was the deputy CFAC. So it was a lot of job satisfaction out there, kind of seeing everything that we had pulled together from multi-domain command and control and making that happen in the Middle East. And yeah, you're deployed for a year and that can be challenging, but it was a dynamic time and I'm proud of what we did over there.
And Jennifer, how was that for you, having your husband?
And that was it was definitely the longest. I mean, they're, 3 months, 6 months at a time. It was easier due to the kids' ages. We didn't have kids at home anymore. I wasn't trying to, help manage other schedules and things. I mean, that would have been Sarah graduated college right before you left because you got to go to that before you deployed. We were living in Northern Virginia at the time. And I think I, was sitting around going, well, hold on. I don't need to stay here. Again, I'm not doing a school system or anything else. And so I decided to go home for that year, which was a gift to me. It was just
home, she means Bowling Green, Kentucky.
That's right.
Yeah, Bowling Green, Kentucky. And, his mom and dad still lived there. And at the time, my dad was still with us. So my mom and dad lived there. And I thought, so it was a gift to me because I got to see my dad every day and help my mom. And it was a faster year for me because I felt like I was being very helpful and useful. And again, it was precious time that I got to have, with my dad. And the bonus too, Sarah, after she graduated, didn't know what she was going to do. And I'm like, well, why don't you and Major, her dog, why don't you guys move home? So I got to have our daughter and, a bonus dog live with me for that year. So
I think it was kind of a shock to the system that the space guy was going to come out and have such an important job in air operations. And again, I'll give two people credit, General Goldfein, for, as people said, are you serious, going to send, a space guy out to try to run the air war? And he was like, yep, this is what we're going to do. So I give him full credit on that. And then General Gus Guastella was the CFAC. He was the 3-star commander of Air Force's Central Command. And I knew him because he had been the AFSpace A3 before that. So I knew him, but I didn't know him. And he was probably maybe marginally concerned because he thought maybe I'll have to step up some more. And I remember when I got out to the theater and we sat down and he started talking to me, and I think I convinced him everything was going to be okay, because like 8 days after I got there, he went on leave. And so that was kind of the vote of confidence, like, okay, maybe he thinks I can run this while he's gone. And so I always appreciated the confidence that he gave me.
At this time, you're a 2-star. Before we get to the 3-star moment, this time you're waiting to pin on 2-star. You have a promotion party at your house in Kentucky. Do you remember this? All your friends showed up. What friends showed up to your 2-star party in Kentucky?
Did you show up?
Hoops and Hippie.
I think I have a picture in our kitchen of that.
That's right.
True.
Evidence.
So let's talk about the characters that live there in Kentucky, because that's who really showed up, was your childhood friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. The best part of those guys is they have no appreciation whatsoever for what a 2-star general does, or what kind of accomplishment that is. And that's just the way I like it. When we go back to Kentucky, we're just, two graduates of Bowling Green High School that get to reconnect with our friends there, and we pick up where we left off in the 80s. It's not about Major General Saltzman. It's about Chance and Jennifer and what are you doing and what's going on. And so that's always been a kind of a sanctuary for us to go back to Kentucky and just hang out and be Bowling Green High graduates.
And so let's transition now into after post-CFAC. Now you're heading to the Pentagon. Probably real happy about it.
Well, let's not undersell that part, because I'm in the Middle East fighting the war, and while I'm away, they decide to stand up a Space Force.
Right.
That was a shock to the system, how fast that all happened. And to be in the Middle East when that happened, you're not in the daily conversations. You're not hearing the back and forth. And so it was a little bit of a shock to me, like, really? Like, we're going to do this? And
when did you first hear about it?
I think it was, I was home in October on a mid-tour break, and there was a news article. This was after President Trump had been out and said something about maybe we need a Space Force. And then there was all the kind of the media blitz on what Space Force, what are you talking about? And I remember thinking, well, that's interesting. But I know how the pace of government is, and I know how this, so I'm not overly concerned about, this is certainly not something that's going to play out in my career. And sure enough, like 3 months later, there just is a Space Force. And so it was kind of a shock to the system that, okay, what does that mean for all of us that are space people, that now there's a service. And that's when General Raymond called and said, hey, I need you to come back and be the chief operations officer at the time. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, like this is what we have to do. But it was a little bit abrupt, I'll say. It went fast.
And sir, what number Guardian were you then?
Well, I like the story because, General Raymond was obviously the first as designated as the CSO, and he hired Chief Toberman to be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force. So they were 1 and 2. And then things were moving fast. In May, there were lieutenants graduating from the Air Force Academy. And so we designated 86 of them to directly commission into the Space Force. And so we had 86 second lieutenants now out there running around. And then I was number 89. And the first general officer to be commissioned across into the Space Force.
And what weapons school graduate are you?
Yeah, it turns out I was the 89th graduate of the space division at the weapons school too. So,
And what's the best high school year graduation?
89.
Correct.
Without question.
karma.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
So now you're the 3. Now you're in the mix-up.
Well, the 3, 5, 9, 10,
Right.
11.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot, and those aren't the right numbers.
Well,
but
it's
it was,
interesting because we were
I mean-
lean and mean back then, and so the position I had on the staff was literally the 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 10.
So I was pretty close.
Unbelievable.
So I didn't have the 5, I didn't have the 8, and I wasn't the 1. Other than that, I had responsibility for all those other directorates. It was an interesting time.
And of course, all the manpower just showed up.
Well, no, not exactly. So it was we pulled a lot of people from other services, obviously heavy from the Air Force at the time, but everybody that came to the Space Force has to volunteer. You don't non-vol people over into another service out of one of their services, and so we had plenty of volunteers, but that's a process to literally move somebody from one service to another, and so that took place over all of 2020. So yes, the Space Force was established in December of 2019, but I think all of us that were there from the beginning would recognize it was 2020 all through that year where we were pulling people over and actually putting them in the service and dedicating them to take care of the Space Force.
And sir, can you summarize that point of your career in helping to stand up the service and how that helped you formulate what your tenure was going to be if you were selected as a chief?
Yeah, I only say this in retrospect, thinking backwards on it, because it didn't really occur to me at the time, but I had done a lot of things to establish new capability. That when I said that I was the first chief of combat plans in the Joint Space Operations Center, the second chief of combat operations in the Joint Space Ops Center, that we built those processes, I really feel like, I have a lot of plank holder plaques from being the first one to establish something. And so I reflected on that in, what did we need to do foundationally to set this organization up for success? And so as the 3, I was thinking, what are the operational processes? What are the readiness processes? What are the intelligence processes? What are the things that we need to do to build the right foundation? And so we had to have those discussions and thoughts early in the planning effort, because we knew we had to get started and give people things to do. And it would have been wrong to assume that space in the Air Force and all of those process and procedure would just be carried over into the Space Force. Because the way the Air Force did it was as a subset of a much larger organization that had much larger processes, and it didn't downscale to the size we were trying to get there. So we had to really invent from scratch a lot of those key planning processes. And so that's what I focused on right out of the gate.
And how was that, Jennifer?
You guys have been talking about, having a Space Force for as long as I can remember. What would you do, and, how it's going to be necessary eventually, but it was definitely more of a dream thing. So to me, I was like, well, shoot, people have been talking about this at my table for years, and how they would, because it did change back then. I mean, unbeknownst to me at the time, but, it did change into something that was warfighting, and you were going to have to, it was going to be different challenges.
It's like, okay, you got all these great ideas. Now you're in charge. Take care of it. Get it done. And so, a little bit like the dog that catches the bumper, right? It's like, okay, well, now you got your own service. How are you going to do it? So we had to put our mouth where our money was.
And so there's a lot of blocking and tackling that goes on there to make sure uniforms are rolled out, processes are established, flags are dispersed, pictures are changed. I mean, all of those things that the service is still kind of struggling with now in terms of just outreach and letting folks know that the service exists. So talk a little bit about that challenge and how challenging it's been.
Well, full credit to General Lehman. You think, well, of course you just get uniforms, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. There's a lot of process. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of naysayers. There's a lot of stakeholders. I mean, it's a complicated process, and you can't just go, well, don't worry about flags. Don't worry about a song. Don't worry. Well, you can't. You kind of, the military kind of requires it, and when there's a ceremony and the flags are all up, says, where's the Space Force flag? Well, we don't have one. Well, that's not acceptable. And so there's just a certain tax that comes with being a service in the Department of War, and you have to pay the tax. It's not up for debate. And so we have to have our own uniforms. We have to have a flag. We have to have a song. We have to have a motto. We have to, all those things have to happen, but they don't just appear out of nowhere. You literally have to go through a pretty detailed process to put all that in place. And so that there was something about trying to establish early legitimacy by doing all of those kind of iconic things that are just required of services. But it took a lot of energy and a lot of effort to put in place. In fact, as I was, General Raymond pinned me on to 3 stars. The first time he brought a general officer over, and we were downstairs. I think I was collecting Jennifer from the front door of the Pentagon. We were walking up, and General Raymond said, if there's not a flag here by all these other flags at the entrance of the Pentagon before the ceremony today, you're not getting your 3rd star. So just make this happen. I'm like, yes, sir, got it. So we just had to kind of get it done and just recognize that that's what it means to be a service in the department, and we're going to take care of all those things. But it was quite an effort. Still is to some degree.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I always would love to look back because, when the Air Force came out of the Army, I was like, I wonder what that was like. Again, we have instant gratification. There's pictures and everybody's a judge and this is terrible. I, don't like this. It was like 6 or 7 years that airmen wore Army uniforms. I mean, it was a long time. And like 6 days after the Space Force, I felt like it was like, well, where is it? How do you not have it yet? And I just often, wonder how that was. Like, all of the things of, do we need a Space Force? The Air Force was doing fine. Well, did they say that when the Air Force, Army flew planes? It's fine. Was there that discussion back then of, why is this a needed service? And I always think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about because, once again, our instant gratification and everybody's a judge, a big one, is an interesting thing. And I just wonder what that was like back then. Yeah. I don't know.
Sir, as you look back in your tenure as a chief, you've accomplished so much, and we're celebrating that soon. What is the one thing that you said, the one thing I didn't quite get across the finish line? What's that one thing you said, man, if I could have gotten that done, that was...
This is such a weapons officer question. Hey, I know you've done 1,000 great things, but critique yourself for a moment. And what's the one thing that you failed on that you would like to publicize for everybody? It's such a weapons officer question, so I appreciate it. And I have said this out loud. I really don't have any regrets because we've moved as fast as we can. I think we've prioritized the actions that we need to accomplish. I think we've focused on, like you said, the blocking and tackling. What are those foundational processes that'll be the gift that keeps on giving? We may not have all the answers, but at least we have a process that tries to discover the new answers and puts in place the right kinds of decisions. Of course, there's many things that I wish could have gone faster. That one of the examples I usually give is, our performance reports are still basically Air Force performance reports. But I think that example talks to the need to be deliberate as well. A guardian identity is so important. It's so important that we have our own culture, that we have our own identity as a service, that it means something specific to be a guardian. And I think, a performance appraisal, a performance report is just a piece of paper, but it's so much more than that. It also says it's a documentation of how well you're doing your job, based on values and things that we think are important. It's how you get feedback. Hey, you're not doing so well. I need you to do something better. It's your record that's going to be evaluated for command positions and senior enlisted leader and all of the important career functions that go on. So it's such an important document that I felt like if we rush into this, we're basically going to take what other services have learned about performance reports and try to make them work for the Space Force, as opposed to really just slowing down and being deliberate about what does it mean to be a guardian and how do we want to use this performance report to establish the culture we need and build a guardian identity that's so critical to the service. And so it's slower than I want, and I wished I had been able to kind of finish it. I think we're on a good path. We're probably pretty close. But that's an example where slower than I wanted to go, but for all the right reasons, I think. And I think in the end, it'll be a better product because of that.
You're able to talk to guardians. So what are some comments that you would provide to guardians?
the overall impression and, things that I get told are extremely positive because they're excited. They do understand, well, they're super, super smart and they are ready to get after whatever is thrown at them.
Let me interrupt,
for sure.
'cause when we go out, we don't talk, we listen.
Right.
Right.
And so she's saying what they tell us, the reason we know they're smart because they're the ones talking. Like, so we don't go to the field and go, this is what you should do and here's how we should behave. Like, we just get into listen mode and it's amazing what they tell us.
Absolutely. I mean, they are excited and they do recognize that this is, kind of a once in a lifetime. You are part of starting a new service and your part is crucially important. I mean, and we need each and every one of them to make it all work. So, I mean, I think there's that recognition because it isn't, just business as usual, or if something isn't going the way that it was intended on paper, we'll change it. And then they recognize that, like, hey, someone's going to listen and, like, we can change things because we are not so, ingrained in doing something that because we've always done it this way. We don't have that yet. We're like, there's going to be mistakes along the way and let's just make it better with each and every change. So I think it's the excitement.
When we go visit the field to figure out what's going on out there and stay in touch, when I grew up, I always remember being in the audience for the all hands, where everybody comes together and the commander gets up on the stage and starts telling you, here's all the things that are going on. And I remember thinking, okay, great. All right, back to work, and I just never felt like me standing on a stage lecturing the troops was as valuable to them as it could be. So what we always do is we get together in small groups where I think people are more likely to talk. So Jennifer sits down with spouses in relatively small groups, or she goes to the family readiness center and they'll sit down in small groups and you get real good feedback. I would sit down with a small group of junior enlisted, a small group of CGOs, a small group of squadron commanders. And then they're talking, and then they're talking to each other, and you're just listening. And I think that's been a way for us to stay connected and figure out what the real issues are and the real challenges are. And I say this all the time. She's my best censor because Guardians will tell her things that I know they would never tell me. They see the rank and they just kind of go, oh,
everything's perfect.
Everything's
and
fine.
Like,
we're doing great, sir. We don't need your help.
And then you get so far as like, what do they really feel? Like, what's really going on?
Right.
I'm like, okay, I can tell you. Because they will. They'll tell me what's going on.
Team Saltzman. One chapter closing, another chapter just beginning. Congratulations to both of you on a very successful career. It's been an honor for me to know you both over this last 30 plus years and to sit down and talk with you and have a candid conversation. Now, you're not going to go far. Here's why. Because I want to present to you a token of our appreciation here at SFA, specifically in helping to stand up a conference solely dedicated to the service in the Space Force. So we expect to see you at the Founders Reception at the Space Power Conference because what I want to present to you is, in fact, the Founders Flag. Here is the Founders Flag. And so, sir, all that means is we need to see you at Space Power Conference this year and a way to stay engaged. So, sir, thanks again for everything you've done, for your friendship, mentorship, and we look forward to staying connected.
We won't go far. Promise.
And for everyone who wants to continue to learn more about what the Space Force is doing, please go over to ussfa.org and join the Space Force Association and become a member and stay engaged. Until next time, Semper Supra.
Semper Supra.